Welcome, everyone, and this is episode number 8, where I interview Brian and Patrick from Closestrong.ai, all about IA and AI's impact on opportunity sales coaching in the GTM world. This podcast is sponsored by the GTM AI Academy, your go-to resource for learning how to leverage AI in go-to-market teams and individual roles. You can find this episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, LinkedIn, and more. Welcome, everyone. It is I, Coach K, and I am joined by two guys that I've actually come to be really good fans with, and one of which we had a football text battle at one point. Brian and Patrick of Closestrong. So excited to have you guys. How are you?
Good.
Good to see you both.
Great. Good to be here.
Love it. We've talked a few times. Like I said, Brian and I were texting about a football with his and my team, who mine sadly lost, but that's okay. Won't talk about that. But I just had to have them on because of what they're doing with both their tech and just their thought leadership around the impact of what AI can do to complement what hopefully should be happening across teams. I'm going to call them you both one at a time. Age before beauty. Patrick, you first.
Very nice.
Yeah. This April 1st edition, I'd love to have you just introduce yourself, like saying where your background, where you came from, and what brought you to Closestrong and what you're up to now.
Yeah, I carried a bag selling software inside and kind of going up at payscale.com for a while. And I really always enjoyed helping my teammates and like doing the kind of the enablement side of things. And this was way back in the day before AI was really a thing. And then, basically built a company, sold it to ServiceNow, and then was working with very large enterprise sales teams with like true 6 and 7 and sometimes 8-figure deals. So really saw the underbelly of what a lot happens in enterprise sales, and then wanted to go out and try to help some of those problems. So hence jumped in with Brian as we co-founded Closestrong a little more than a year ago, year and a half now. So yeah, it's been a wild ride, and it's fun to be at it, helping as the chief of revenue here at Closestrong.
Love it, man. Welcome. Brian, your turn, my friend. Same question.
So the football teams, by the way, were the Northwestern Wildcats and the Utah Utes. So you and I were the only one. We were the only one watching that game.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're passionate about it, though.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. So yeah, thanks for asking. So I was, my last sort of real position was a VP of National Account Sales at a Fortune 50. And then I ran a consulting firm with Max Bazerman, who was the vice chair of the Harvard Negotiation Project for 15, 20 years, something like that. And we did negotiation training and consulting all over the globe, 47 countries, did rollouts with Microsoft, Google, Lucent, FedEx, et cetera. And I then co-founded with Patrick and a few other folks, Closestrong, about a year ago, because I saw a big problem, quite frankly, with the way we were doing our work in my past company. So we founded this as like the next generation of what I had been doing for many years.
So I'm going to dive into this because until I saw the demo, I didn't quite understand what the tech was you guys were doing. Then I saw it, I'm like, holy flip, this is rad. So a lot of AI tech is going like down the road of like AI role plays or prospecting or like one call reviews, that kind of stuff. But you guys are taking a more holistic view at the opportunity itself, automating that opportunity coaching so you have the context of the entire deal, which I thought was awesome. I'd love to have you. I know, Brian, you and I talked about this on your podcast, but talking more about your tech from the training data viewpoints instead of first question, because I want to make sure I let the listeners share this, is that the training data you use, is it your own model? Are you complementing your own model with ChatGPT or I should say OpenAI? Or tell me more about the data you're trained on.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Patrick and I were talking to an investor a few weeks ago who heard AI and was like, okay, that means large language model. That means massive amounts of data and all this training. And he said, how long before there's efficacy with this thing, right? Because it's a natural question when you're thinking about how long before, AI gets smart enough to produce me some data. And I mentioned to you before that what we're building is something that's just emerging called an intelligent application, which is really a combination of modern software infused with AI. And the cool thing, and I'm going to get to where our data comes from, but I think the structure kind of helps. If you're listening to this and you don't know anything about intelligent applications, you can do a quick search for what Gartner says about it. But the thing that's cool about it is that, with an intelligent application is built to solve a very specific prevalent problem with a very precise process. right? Where AI is unbelievably helpful, like, but it's very broad problems and very broad solutions where
Right.
IA has built to, and so the process that we built is when Patrick and I first started the company, I coached him on a deal, right? We've coached billions of dollars of deals, and
Right.
Patrick took, an unusual amount of notes, or his AI note taker did. And we basically recreated the human coaching experience, where we would go in step by step. And so that at the high level process, and we can talk about that, like the best practice process steps for getting a deal closed. And the other thing that we modeled, which was your original question, is the data.
Yeah.
And most of the data, we'll pull a little data from whatever CRM someone's using, but it's opportunity level stuff. Who are the stakeholders? How big is the deal? Most of the data we are custom configuring. Every client has their own sort of vector database with their own data in it, what we call the
Yeah.
strategy center or the brain of the coach. So we make the coach very smart on what products are you selling, who are you competing against, in what vertical, like how should we be going to market. And if I were a really good in-house coach, I would know all those things, and even down to what's an ideal customer look like, and what's an ideal product configuration, and
Right.
how do we want commercial terms packages structured. This is all what we did in the human environment, but the humans couldn't have a lot of that contextual data, right? We were jumping from deal to deal, company to company. We
Yeah.
didn't know enough about their product. We didn't know enough about their competitors. We didn't know enough about product
Right.
configurations. We could just play stump the rep and find out what they don't know. Where this coach also has the answer. So we build out for each customer. We're building out that database in the coach's brain. So that's where the data is coming from. Is where we're kind of custom solutioning that for every customer, so it can reflect, what the best possible coach and hardest working coach you can ever
Right.
find.
Yeah, I love that you brought this up because I was bringing up based on our conversation before with the IA versus AI, because there's so like a lot of people get like predictive analytics, machine learning, like there's all these subcategories that's veiled as AI. That's like depending
Yeah.
on which one it is, it's very different of results you get. So, do you
Yeah.
want to talk? This could go for both of you. I'll start with you, Patrick. But talking more about AI, I'm sorry, IA specifically in the envelope of AI. Tell me why
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
impactful for what you guys do versus just saying, let's just point ChatGPT in an opportunity and let it just do its thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'm going to give you an answer and then ask Patrick to build
Please.
on it. But when we think about what we've built, and quite frankly, we didn't know it was called IA. Our CTO, Jason, basically said, I asked him, I was like, well, are we AI? Are we an LLM? Are we training an LLM? And he said, well, we're kind of building something that doesn't exist. And we have a skeleton, which is the coding and the screens, right? That's the very precise coaching process that brings up data for the rep to say, oh, you're selling this against this competitor. Let me help you do some analytics. And then the brain is the AI that helps process some of that data and pushes them through the coaching. It's sort of like the bot that's talking to them. That's really the easiest way for us to think about it, where AI is mostly brain, and it's missing the skeleton. It's missing the very precise process that walks
Yeah.
people through a solution to a very prevalent problem, which is
Mhm.
we're not closing deals at a high enough rate, and we don't have time to coach them. Those are the two things we're going
Super
after.
interesting.
Yeah.
Patrick, what did I miss?
I mean, there's two things that come to mind that I want to just hit on. One is there's a lot of executives that you said are listening in on this, and enablement professionals. Everyone's rolled out some sort of new training, and Medic is pretty hot right now just for discovery models. But like most people, it's a blank form. I got a bunch of blank things, and I have to stuff it. And yeah, 12 months from now, it will be weird if your AI is not automatically filling it all out for you. The reps are going to expect, like, why isn't it automatically doing it for me, right?
Yeah.
But even that, the data that you're limited to, and this is the second point. So the first one is like a lot of blank forms. The second point is what's really difficult about a lot of applications in this space right now that are claiming AI features is the data set that they're all using is almost identical. The data set is activity data in the CRM, it's call transcripts and recordings, right?
Mhm.
And those are kind of the primary data feeds for any kind of RevOps AI, even Rev enablement AI that's doing like skills coaching. Same kind of, everyone's got the same data. So one of the things
Yeah.
that's different about IA is when you're doing the hard work of coming up with new and better data, and you're putting it in a format upon which you can coach in a very precise way. That's what's missing in the market, is something that's hyper relevant because it involves new data. in a new format. And so that's the thing that when we put this in front of customers, they go, whoa, how is this like,
Right.
so how does it know so much? And it's like, well, it's because the data that we're informing it with does have a human touch on it, which is part of the magic of what we do.
It's interesting, Jonathan, what Patrick said.
Yeah.
We were talking to a customer one day, and we were over explaining how we do this. And Patrick said, you know what? Just your priorities are coming out of the coach's mouth. And I love that. It's like, what's the priority of your deal desk? What do they want? You know, what's the priority of people who own product? What are your product configurations? What does an ideal customer look like? What value points do you want? Are you emphasizing? That's what we're going to put into the brain of the coach. And I love that notion about, you know, what are your priorities might mean 3 people, right? It might mean marketing, it might mean product, it might mean deal desk, and we can get those priorities. And if here's the other killer. I was talking to a VP of sales who said, you know, we used to do annual planning annually, and now we do the equivalent of annual planning quarterly because everything's changing quickly. You know, as your priorities switch, we can put it into the coach's brain, and the coach can be coaching to say, hey, we just acquired a new company or rolled out a new solution, or we have a new go-to-market strategy or a new pricing policy. Well, let's get it into the coach's brain and let's start getting that executed one deal at a time tomorrow.
I think that's part of where, I mean, because this whole area is so new, people just don't understand, not because they're not smart enough, just because they just don't this is all new, right? Just trying to figure this out. Of like, some coaching call things are either built on their own data, or they just plug into OpenAI or Claude or whatever other tool they can, and then they point it, like what you said, point it to the metrics or the call transcripts or whatever, and try to get stuff out of that, which you can. But I think, to your point, getting really pointed and figuring out what is unique that's not in those places is where some of the magic happens, you know? So question then, when you do that and you point your particular AI at this thing and you discover new metrics, like, is it the AI that discovers it? And then, or I should say the platform, sorry, not the IA, I'm getting confused with acronyms. But is it that then tells you saying, hey, in this particular opportunity, there's this new metric that's this thing we now should measure? Like, how does that bubble up?
Yeah. And you know what occurs to be? It's funny. After our first call, you had a completely different idea about what we did. So I'm going to run through really quickly what a coaching call looked like when I was doing human coaching all over the world, and exactly how our solution does it. So the very first conversation is, you know, what we call anchoring. It's like, okay, rep, I see you've already told me you're selling this solution against this competitor in this vertical. Cool. So that's all in context in my brain right now. So the first conversation is, are we having the right conversations with the right people? Here are the kind of people we should be talking to selling this solution. And we want a conversation that's not so much tactical and price and product. It's more strategic about the business impact we're having. And it's giving examples of, hey, rep, are you talking to these people at these levels? Pull your Salesforce context in there. And are you having a conversation that sounds more like this or this? Okay, cool. We see we have some gaps. We see we're having some sort of incorrect conversations. I'm going to throw that in the action plan later. So that's the first step, is talking to the right people about the right thing. The second step is qualify it. We heard, I don't care if you're mid-stage or even after mid-stage, we heard a lot of VPs of sales say, I'm asked to close deals that we shouldn't have gone after in the first place. So the next step with the coach is saying, here's what an ideal opportunity looks like, given what you're selling and where you're selling it. And let's do some analysis to figure out where it aligns and where it doesn't. And again, I'm going to create actions for any areas where we're guessing or we don't know. You know, having the right conversations. Is this thing qualified? The next level, the most important, is, I see you're selling this against this competitor, and it's bringing up competitor analysis at the decision level. We model this like a decision tree almost. Right. When your customers are putting you and this alternative side by side, here's the people that should be involved. Here's the criteria they should be using, and here's where we have an edge. It's that level of data that is providing the rep to, again, make that strategy to tactics connection. Then it sends them off, like we would do in the real world, to discovery, to say, all right, we looked at the conversation levels, we've qualified it, we've looked at competitive differentiation. There's a bunch of stuff we don't know or we're guessing at. This is where the AI is going to produce very precise discovery questions by the stakeholders that you said are relevant, and say, go ask Jonathan these questions, go ask Patrick these questions, and then come back. And then, cool, okay, now we have a better competitive position, and it's going to score you. It's going to give you power analysis. It's going to give you qualification score. But when you come back, then we're going to start configuring the product to say, all right, we know the customer is trying to order a point product. And we know an ideal solution configuration is everything on the truck. So the coach is going to try to get them to configure the most broad solution we can tell the customer. It's also then going to prompt you to say, all right, you have to attach some commercial terms to that solution. Here are some of the current priorities of the deal desk or whoever. We want more liquidated damages clauses, or we want longer term contracts. And then it's going to bake that into 3 different customer facing offers to say, okay, cool, Jonathan, you and I just crafted the most holistic solution at the most aggressive commercial terms. Now let's package 2 others so you can go to that client and offer 3 paths forward. So, I think it just helps to put it in context. That's what would happen.
Right.
In a couple sessions. A rep is in there and walking through all stages, getting it to close.
Yeah, what I love about that is not just reviewing the call to score. It's like with some programs, when you review and score the call, there still has to be that connected piece between saying, okay, you got it scored, but now what do I do? Like,
Yeah.
what do I do in this specific
Yeah.
context with this specific person, with this specific industry, with this specific product, like all that.
And it's how too,
Yeah, it's
Jonathan,
how.
right? Patrick, I've heard him say a lot. A lot of the tools that are out there are the what. It's algorithmic generated action steps. That's cool. I have to prove my value. Well, how do I do that? Well, you need the analysis of this competitor side by side right now. Given what you're selling and what the customer's needs are, we need to net out why us. What are the 2 or 3 reasons why us? So the how is where people struggle.
And a lot of that happens offline, but I'll just throw it out there. It happens in PowerPoint decks. It happens in,
Oh yeah.
spreadsheets. It happens in, I've been on meetings. I mean, in the enterprise sales process at a, big company, perhaps I already mentioned it, big public company, there'd be like 8 people with it for an hour, just like hashing over all the deals and like chewing it up and spitting it back out. I'm like, oh my, like this is so inefficient. And all this is happening like the old school way. And it's like 2024, like what are we thinking? So I think this is kind of the, as an executive looking at AI, how can AI help? AI can only be as helpful as it is smart about what you do. And I think that's the chasm that people are realizing. Like it says AI, but I'm still over here in my PowerPoint mucking with a bunch of value statements. And I think that's the gap that still exists in the market. And that's, I think, what IA can fill is a precise answer to that problem.
Yeah, it's kind of like I had someone else ask me once, like, how do you even compare AI to anything? I'm like, AI is like electricity. It's all about how you point it. It could be this humongous load that, like, right now the Earth is just projecting electricity, but you don't feel it 'cause it's just so spread out. Whereas if you get it concentrated, it becomes very powerful.
Yep.
And that's what I'm hearing from you is this concept of like getting it really narrow and powerful, so that you're getting all your focused into one energy point, which is cool.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, the other thing we haven't talked about that maybe you're going to lead into is what problem we're solving for. And
Right.
here, this is for especially for anybody C-level or leading an enterprise sales team or even sales enablement. This is a Jim Dickey, who a lot of people in our space know. He's a founder of Chief Sales Officer Insights and is an analyst in the space and on our board. Jim pointed out to me the other day, close rates were 46%. This is win rates of deals that are forecasted at 90%. We're closing at 46% in 2004. In 2023, they were closing at 47%. And it's one of those things that just kind of exploded my brain. And he said, think about the billions that have been thrown after sales training and tools and CRM, and we're still sitting at this crappy close rate. So that's one of the things we were going after is, all right, we know, by the way, that if you can get one-to-one coaching with reps by really good quality coaching, we know that, in fact, Patrick, correct me if I screw this up, but we just saw a stat the other day that when managers exceed coaching expectations, their teams meet their stretch goals 95% of the time. And when they don't, they're meeting their goals 47% of the time, something like that. So
Crazy.
We know what has impact. We haven't been able to scale that. I did billions of dollars in human coaching, and it was very expensive for our customers, very difficult for me to scale. And so, quite frankly, one of the things we're going after—
You didn't make billions on that coaching, just to clarify for the audience.
I did not.
Otherwise, you'd already be on your yacht. Yeah, but
I don't think I'd be running. I don't think I'd be running Closestrong. That's a fair point. But it's, I'd mentioned that in my past life, I ran a training and coaching company, and I saw that the coaching was really impactful. Here's the other thing. So we have this close rate problem. We know what impacts it. American companies are spending $26 billion a year on sales training. And virtually everybody that Patrick and I have talked to, 65, 67 sales leaders in the last year, just generally about what is struggling with your pipeline. And when we talk to them about sales training and say, okay, you have a sales problem, you announce contender selling at SKO, and then you roll out contender selling to everybody in groups of 20, virtually or in person around the world. And then what happens? Nothing. We don't know.
Nothing.
Managers don't have time to coach it, but it's very scalable. Rolling out kind of general methodology is very scalable. That's why people do it. And we're trying to make this transition that people should be spending where we believe where the market's going in sales enablement, what we're calling on-demand revenue enablement, is we're getting away from generic training rollouts, and we need one-to-one, 24/7, 365 support for reps, in context deal coaching. Forget these drive-by just-in-case events, which, by the way, for people who have rolled out a medic or a challenger or something, that's fine. Now you need to make it stick, which our coach can help reinforce that stuff, plus add this close plan. And so awesome. I just wanted to get there because it was a huge frustration of mine that we were rolling these things out, and really frustrated with what happened after me and my trainers left. And we know this makes a difference. And so we're really, redefining what we think about sales enablement as event-based, kind of out of context or lightly customized, to highly customized, consistent support over the next year as many times as you need it, and executing your strategy that way. And the investment's about the same, to do this or to do training. So that at the highest level we would encourage people to think about that in 2024 and beyond, where you're spending your dollars, because there's a better way to do that now.
You said once, I think it was on your podcast, you said something like the methodology format was event-based.
Yes.
And you tell me about, I want to hear what you say about that, because I can't
yeah.
I want to say.
Yeah. So and I'm just laughing because there's so many people that Patrick and I have asked a lot of questions of, and we get varying answers. But on this one, we get 100% of the people going, yeah. So I get invited to the sales training event. I was either, I watched my people go, or I went myself. And for 2 days, I got stuff crammed down my throat. And the reason I went is because in the evenings we had cocktail parties with my buddies. Seriously. Right. They were like, and then some of the executives were like, the thing with training is if you get one or two things out of that event, it's worth it. No, it's not. No, it's absolutely not worth it. You flew 20 people to the place. You threw them in a hotel. You paid for the consultant to come in and do this work. And all that opportunity cost of 400 reps out of market for 2 days, whether it's virtual or in person, like that. No, it's not worth it to walk away with one or two things. It isn't. The event stuff, the methodology that's out there is good. Medic, Challenger, they're all good stuff. It's just not, managers don't have time to pull it through. And so when we responded in my old world to RFPs, 90% of the RFP was about who's your instructor, what's the methodology, what's the agenda, do you have any smile sheets from how much people liked it in the past? Nothing about what happens after you leave, almost nothing. And I did that for almost 20 years and rarely ever got asked. And when we did get asked, we'd say, okay, 2 ways to do it. I can train your managers to pull it through. And we would do that. And then managers didn't have time to do it. And they're not going to have time to do it. They're just slammed. Or we can come in and do it, which is what we did. Our first contract was coaching $1 billion in renewals at a massive tech company. Again, very hard to scale. So that was always the answer. It's like either we do it and it's super expensive, or you do it and you don't have time. And now we're just saying, skip over that whole event part and let's go right to in-context application to every deal. I think the average company is coaching 5% of deals in their pipe. So the question is, what's ideal? What if you could get to 60, 70, 80%? You don't want to go to 100. But what if you could coach all those? That's the difference between an event, a lightly customized event that maybe has no follow-up, and 365, 24/7 support in context as much as you need it. And I'm sorry if that sounds too much like a sell, but like we get jacked about it because it's like I was so frustrated in the old world of doing that was the best that was available to us. This kind of technology wasn't available when I was out there selling in methodology, and there's still some benefits to it. Yeah. It's just the benefits here are like tenfold.
Well, to your point, though, I mean, you think about, it's not the methodology that's the problem. Methodology is good. It's been very helpful for the team. It's the follow through and the consistency and impacting of it, because sometimes, I should say sometimes, most of the time in the
Yeah.
old way, it takes forever because everyone gets pieces of it. And then, but you
Yep.
hear the weaknesses in deal reviews and coaching, like you hear them missing 80% of the methodology because they just don't have time to apply it and they don't have time
Yeah.
to be coached and blah, 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 But when you have a tool that can connect the methodology and say, this is how this applies in this situation, this person with your personality, with this thing, then it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Click.
Yeah.
And it just like comes together,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny too because it's in one sense it's not even methodology. It's going right. The new world that we're talking about is going direct to in context coaching and application as the new
Right.
maybe the new training. And Patrick and I argue about this all the time. He's like, "We're not in the training world." I'm like, "We are," but it's a complete
It's a new
redefinition of
version.
training. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
new world. I'm gonna shift gears just a hair, and Patrick, you kind of teed me up before because today, when I'm launching this, is April Fool's Day. So tell me, what's the foolish things that people do around AI, IA, machine learning, predictive analytics, whatever? Give me a demo.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the first things is, looking at everybody that's rebranding their thing as AI,
Is AI? Yeah.
or as
Yep.
AI features. So I think one of the most foolish things is taking at face value how somebody's positioning kind of their newest thing at you.
Yep.
And one of the ways to cut through that is getting under. I think a lot of people are quick to say, okay, what's informing this? I think I've heard some smart people that are not fools say, hey, what's informing this? Like, and how long does it take to become like legit? Is this going to take a long time? And so we've heard some of those questions, but the foolish way to go about it is just to say, oh, cool, like our current provider has added this new AI thing. And most of the time, it's this kind of table stakey kind of stuff that everyone's kind of ankle biting each other for, like, oh, I got a little bit of insight on my customer. Oh, I got this email that AI wrote for me based on a little bit of information. And it's like
Yeah.
some of this stuff I've heard people even tell me, like, this all feels gimmicky. Like, it just feels like, hey, you took
Right.
some tech and now you added AI onto the end of your thing. And so I think a foolish thing is kind of accepting the gimmicky things as if it's going to make a huge impact. That's probably one of the first big blunders.
Right.
And then the other thing is, I would say this, and then I'll send it back to you here. But the other thing is just on this goal of trying to consolidate. When people are trying to consolidate, they're inevitably, I think a foolish thing is to assume that one tool can do it all. But everyone's trying to like just land grab right now for, like, oh, but
Mhm.
if I did this, then you can sort of cancel that other thing. And I think realistically, we're not going to get there for a while. Like being able to really truly, cancel renewals of certain tech. But I think the wise thing to do is to try to say, like, well, what are the gaps that we can fill, that we're doing manually? Like, what are the things that we can maybe replace some of the manual steps that we're doing, and try to use some of that data and bring it out of bring it from offline to online. Like, that's happening in a spreadsheet or an email can I bring into this newer format? And some of the stuff we're talking about, like, taking a generic battle card and customizing it on your own for this one customer. It's like, hey, AI can do that if
Mhm.
you have the right data coming into it. So I think a
Right.
broad-based consolidation is still a long way off, but I do think that in small ways people can look for, like, how can we take something that's we're actually losing, like Brian was saying, we're losing like what the best reps are doing because it's all happening offline. So we got to find a way to get to learn from that, and then to be able to scale what is best practice from 2 or 3 reps to make it more common practice. That would be more of like where we want to go
Yeah.
with some of these features. So it's just like call BS where you think there might be some BS, and let them defend whoever's talking with you about their latest feature. Let them defend where the data is coming from, how that's going to stay accurate, and the feedback loops that are involved in it. There's a lot of interesting questions you can get into. And I like the word efficacy, Brian. You said, how fast until your thing is going to actually be efficacious towards my end goal? And I think the quicker you can kind of challenge a vendor on that, the less foolish you'll be.
Well, I think it's smart because, like you said, everyone's saying, "Okay, we got AI too. That's cool," and it's just some sort of weird random bolt-on from an open API connection.
Yeah.
Like
Um,
a wrapper around
like
ChatGPT
a
or
wrapper, yeah.
something.
Which
Yeah.
there's some places like Jasper is a cool tool. It's just been customized to a very specific set, and it is successful. Like it doesn't mean it can't work, but the quality of what you're getting on the other side will be dictated by all that funneled power and what that's being funneled by, you know?
Oh,
So,
one more thing.
yeah,
We have to say this. I know it's March 20, or right now it's April, actually, first day of April 2024. We need to also ask the question, how many AI insights are reps being bombarded with? If you haven't done this lately, ask like which one you listen to, right? Because you're going to start to get a
yeah,
lot of duplicative, redundant stuff that might even be conflicting for your teams when you're thinking about the tech stack. What's foolish is to like let them be distracted by 7 different AIs giving them insights, right? It's like, no, you don't want that. You need to get something that's actually going to be the quarterback, like almost
yeah,
like the strategic AI that's like working with all the other minions to be able to kind of say, this is what you should
yeah.
really be doing. So that's another foolish thing, is letting there be too much insights that create, a bunch of noise.
Well, and
Yeah.
and I think too, Jonathan, one thing I've heard Patrick, I heard you say in the past is the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. That there's a lot of efficiency things out there that are automating tasks, but it's like what's going to make you more effective? What's going to help you execute your? And I love that notion of because there's not so much in the effectiveness category today.
I wanted to talk about one of the thought leaders. I'm not going to mention my name, but one thought leader says that AI feedback is not coaching. So curious on your take on that, saying, okay, what's the difference between just bubbling up feedback mechanisms versus what actual coaching is? What would you say that is with AI specifically, not necessarily humans?
Patrick, I'll let you go first.
I'll give a short answer because you're more of the coaching expert than I am. But I think, again, when you look at kind of the raw data coming in, anybody can say, hey, look, you've only had 3 calls, and normally people have 5 calls by now. Make more calls, right? Like, that's really simple and generic. Goes back to like, okay, you're pointing out like, duh, I should have more
Yeah.
calls. Got it. But so I think that leader talking about like, the ability to have more effective, like a coaching conversation, is where you're like, if you look at the ICF, like the International Coaching Federation, you're asking open-ended questions. Like, you are not bringing a very small, obvious fact in a coaching conversation. You are trying to actually like open up a dialogue, right?
Right.
And you're trying to let people, you're trying to help someone navigate something that should be relatively complex, not just, hey, you haven't talked to your brother in 3 weeks. Maybe you should call him again. Like, what if a coach did that in real life? Would you keep working with that coach? It's like, oh, maybe I should. Here's the $300 for that hour. I'm going to go over here and call my brother because I
Right.
didn't know I need to do that. So, and Brian, I'll let you keep going.
Yeah.
I love that analogy, by the way, metaphor, analogy, whatever it is. And yes, I agree with all that. And I also think I'm going to go back to this strategy to tactics execution that, Patrick and I were talking to one company that's got over 50 products, and they're trying to make this strategic shift to selling this certain group of products. And another company, a shipping company, they just bought one of the big competitors in Europe. And it's like, how quickly can we monetize that? How quickly can we have words coming out of reps' mouths in both of those situations? And I don't
Right.
know that any other tools are going to get there. So we say, all right, we just bought, or have this new capability. What conversation should we be having with who now? What does an ideal opportunity look like to execute this new strategy, right? How does this
Right.
change our competitive position? How should we be solutioning and applying commercial terms to this new strategy? And that to me is where it's at. It's like, when that changes next quarter, we'll start coaching for the new direction. And I don't know anything, like Patrick says, if all the AI is sourcing from the same place, this is sourcing from a brain that we built to execute your strategy. And by the way, before that scares the heck out of anybody, it takes us about 6 weeks to populate that brain. And Patrick laughs that I said people hear AI and they think big data. And we're talking more small data. We're talking, right?
Very
Not
targeted.
tons. Yeah, not tons
Yeah.
of data, but super precise data, ideal opportunity criteria, ideal solution configuration. Let's get this in 10 rows of data or less in a way that you can use it. I interviewed a year ago when we just had this concept, a VP at Salesforce, and she said to me, this idea, like this thing has to be the central source of truth for reps. And I love that idea. And central source of truth about strategy. And to me, the cool thing for rep is I am now executing the company strategy one deal at a time. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
cool.
I love it. Well, before we wrap up, I want to make sure we have this. It's Closestrong.ai is the website, correct? Awesome.
yep.
If you have not seen a demo, you guys would have your minds blown. You do. And like I said, I didn't understand. I thought it was like a call coaching tech. And I was like, it's way more than that. It's contextually opportunity based future casting stuff. I was just like, and I'm in AI stuff all the time. And I was like, this is, I won't swear, but it's kick A is what I would say. It's just awesome. So I'm really excited about what you guys are doing. Thank you so much for coming on. Any last words of anything you want to give before I take us off?
Not for me. I just appreciate your time, Jonathan, and inviting us and anybody who listened. So
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's an exciting space to be in. And the quicker we can kind of cut through the noise and the crap, the faster we're going to get to value and effectiveness. And we're just grateful to be on. So thanks for letting us kind of, jam with you a little bit on it.
Love it, man. I love this topic. You guys are great. So thank you so much. Everyone else listening, tune in next time. And thank you all. Until later.
Thanks for listening to the GTM AI podcast. Please follow, subscribe, like, comment, and come back for more.